I want to talk to you tonight about how we connect with nature, about how to take your own personal process of being a naturalist and take it up to 11. And to share with you what, for me, have been some of the most critical discoveries for me in my process of becoming a naturalist. The way I am a naturalist has changed radically over the last 5 or 6 years or so. And I'm having so much more fun than I ever have in the past. And I want to give you the formula of what's been going on with that. Because I also think that that formula is critical to sustaining us as a community of stewards. This is, I'd like to introduce you folks to Amelia. She's introducing her friend Chuck to non-native plants. It's Chuck because we couldn't figure out if it was a chicken or a duck. But I've been working in environmental education with everybody else's kids for years, and now that Amelia and her little sister Carolyn are on the scene, the urgency of this has really grown for me. And so what I've been thinking about, how do we actually connect with nature? What does the process look like? I have spent a lot of time playing sort of nature games and doing those things with outdoor ed groups, groups that I've led. And what I found is that a lot of the ways that I was trying to connect people with nature, it's not what really connected me with nature. And so here's my sort of, in a nutshell, my approach. What I do is I walk out into the woods and I am looking for some phenomenon that catches my eye. And in this, my general scan as I'm going about is I'm looking for wonder and I'm looking for beauty. And so if something catches my eye because it's strange or weird or odd, all right, I'm in the wonder. Or if I find something beautiful, I get excited about that. And that's what initially brings me in. And by beautiful, I don't mean, look at that spectacular sunset. I've been working at training myself to find micro beauties all around me, from the way that light reflects off a blade of grass, the way that the prismatic effect you get in a dewdrop. For wonders, I'm not looking for big capital M mysteries. What I'm doing is I'm looking for just anything that initially makes me kind of go, huh, that's funny. Just a little slight feeling of like, that's odd. And what that is, it's a clue to me that there's something in the way I understand the world to be that's different than the way that the world really is. And that is an opportunity for growth, and that's an opportunity for learning. So initially I'm walking around, and I'm just looking, I'm looking in this process for wonder, I'm looking for beauty. And then the next step is to pay attention. And for a long time I've been telling people, like, pay attention to it, look at it hard. So you look at something, and the problem of staring at a pine cone, staring at some object, is nature just kind of stares back. Staring is something that we do with our eyes, but real observation is a process that goes on in your mind, inside your brain. So to really bring our observation up to the next level, there is a process that goes on in the mind which I have just been diving into and delighting in. This process is starting to go viral, and I know that there are some California naturalist programs that are using this approach. And if you're not, you've got to check it out, because you're going to get to play with it tonight, and it's an absolute game changer. It is a triad of 3 prompts, 3 ideas that interlock and fit together and reinforce each other. All right? Raise your hand if you know where we're going. Say it with me. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. So I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. So I notice is our raw observations. I want to look and to look again. I want to observe something so deeply that even if I've seen it 100 times before, I can find something new in that very familiar object. Rachel Carson said, how deeply, how passionately would you look at something if you knew that if it was the first time that you ever saw it, or if you knew that this was the last time that you would ever be able to see it. And to bring that kind of focused attention to whatever it is that I'm observing. And so this whole process starts with a cascade of just raw observations. And what I challenge myself to do whenever I'm doing this, I sit down beside a poppy. I say to myself each time, I'm going to see something in this poppy that I have never noticed before. And the crazy thing is, when you approach it like that, you will. You do. There's actually an infinite amount of possible observations that we can make in anything around us. And so instead, so with knowing that, I'm finding that I'm seeing a lot more. The next idea is I wonder. Right? And this is the idea of intentional curiosity. We live in a culture that suppresses questions and questioning. We reward and even elect people who seem to have all the answers. All right? But the person who says, well, I really don't understand what we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes, and this is making notes, that person does not get promoted. Right? But they're the one who's being honest. Right? You've been in a room where somebody asked the question, like, thank you. Right? Right? We're afraid to ask those questions. And even when it's just us and a bug, right? We feel uncomfortable with questions. And having mysteries out there in front of us, we feel a little bit of cognitive dissonance, and we want to fill that with an answer. All right? So sometimes we don't even look for the questions. But there's all this research on curiosity. And it turns out that the more curious you are about anything, the more your brain learns, the more you remember. And also the more that curiosity is actually associated with a dopamine release. So the more you're curious about something, the more your brain goes, right? And just falls into it, right? Knowing that, curiosity is not just a trait that you have. It's actually a skill that you can develop by practice. And the more that you do that, the more comfortable you're going to get with it, until questions emerge everywhere out of everything. And this last part is also equally critical. The idea of it reminds me of is that you do not come to whatever observation it is as a babe in the woods. You come to this, you've perhaps taken the California Naturalist course, you've had other courses, you saw something on TV. You want to look at whatever it is and say to yourself, you know what this reminds me of? And this can be as scientific or this can be as playful and metaphoric as your brain likes it to be. And what happens when you go there is whatever it is, actually you develop more meaning, more of a relationship with it. This reminds you of something that you saw in your grandmother's garden when you were a kid. And I haven't thought about that in the longest time. Right? So it's an opportunity to go back there. Or it's an opportunity to kind of go through your mental Rolodex. You know, what have I learned that if I intentionally kind of seek for, what have I learned that kind of associates with this in one way or another? That's going to pop up on my radar. And when it does, this whole observation cluster is going to stick more in my head because I'm associating it with things that are already hooked into my gray matter. So the thing that starts the cascade is I notice. And then these other two, I wonder and it reminds me of, will just start to pop up all around you as you make observation, observation, I notice. I wonder, observation, observation. You know what this reminds me of? Observation, question, observation, observation. It reminds me of. These things will start to play together, and sometimes a question will then get you to make other sorts of observations. So they'll start to reinforce each other, and the process itself is delightful. But I find that when I'm just sitting there looking at something, what happens when we're sitting there and you stare at some object, and this is going on up here, is our mind starts to wander. Even when we have an object right in front of us and our eyes are directed at us, the research on mind wandering is really crazy. We spend more than 40% of our time thinking about things other than what we think we're actually doing. All right? And when we're off task like that, our brain isn't even having as much fun. So what we do here to get yourself not to do this mind wandering and to kind of keep yourself on task and to also help you remember each little observation you make, because you're sitting there, you're making all these observations. What happens is most of this, perhaps an idea raises to the top of your conscious attention and then it blows out the back of your head. However, if you say what you see or wonder or connect out loud, this is a phenomenon called the production effect. It gets stuck in your brain. So what I want to do is this: I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of triad, not in my head, but I want to say this out loud. All right? This approach is actually even taught to police detectives and patrolmen. When they're observing something, they want to remember it. They're trained to say what they see out loud. Because if you want your lapel cam to match your written report, all right, it turns out it's a good thing when that happens. All right, you'd better do this. All right, it's a very, very powerful effect. It's the production effect. It is, and that's the impact of saying, verbalizing your observations, verbalizing these things. It then gets stuck right there in your head. So you're going to say these things out loud. When I am alone by myself in the middle of the woods, I'm sitting there and I'm talking to the trees. I'm talking to the birds. It turns out it doesn't scare them away. If you're right next to them, maybe, right? But you know, even at this distance, so I'm kind of talking like this, and the bird is like, well, you're not acting like a predator. This is cool. We're fine here. All right? You start saying these things out loud, you're going to find everything that you say out loud, your brain remembers. Another piece that you can do to take this even further is, as you're doing this, instead of doing it in social isolation, if you teach this triad of observation and connection to nature to your friends, you start doing this together, you start to get the advantage of the observations, the questions, and the it reminds me ofs that all your friends are making. And together, this cumulative brain, this meta brain that you're getting, all right, this distributed cognition of everybody's thoughts all jumping in on this, whatever you're looking at, guarantee you there's going to be wonder and surprises and absolute entranced fascination with whatever you look at. So what you want to do is do this with your friends. So it's, I notice, I wonder what reminds me of, out loud with your homies. And that's why I've passed out pine cones to everybody in the room. Do we have pine cones distributed? Yes. All right? So we want one pine cone per 2 or 3 people. Right?
Everyone has their own. Maybe not everybody. There's a lot of pine cones.
All right. Is there a pine cone deficit in any corner of the room? All right. That's a pine cone need right here. All right. Look out for prickly ponderosa. All right. Anybody else need pine cones? You're going to want a pine cone for this. All right. Because what we're going to do, I'm going to tell you, it's going to feel funky to talk out loud your observations at the start. Get used to it, all right? Just accept that. It's kind of weird, all right? But you're just going to do a stream of consciousness riff of observation. And you're going to be leaning over with, you guys need another one right in here. You're going to be leaning over with the friends who are sitting there near you. And whoa. And what you're going to do is be sharing observations. And you're not going to be waiting a polite turn for your moment to speak. Because this is going to be conversation jazz. You have to listen and contribute all at the same time, right? So it's conversation, naturalist, observation, jazz. And as I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of out loud, all right? And there is one of the pine cones that I passed out is actually a really special one. There's one pine cone in this room that is really, there's something absolutely incredible about it. We'll see if you have that one. All right? All right? We're gonna try this for 1 minute, and you're not going to want to stop when I'm done, but when I say scene, we're going to bring our attention back here. Ready, go. And scene. Raise your hand if you think you got the special one. You're right. All right, did anybody in this room notice something in, actually that was less than a minute, in less than a minute about a ponderosa pine cone that you had never noticed before? How many people? Oh, not ponderosa pine cones. I better give myself a field guide. All right. So, did anybody get a really? What was one of the most interesting? It reminds me of in the room. What was one of the most interesting? It reminds me of the room. I'm going to go right back there. Yeah. So say it loud. Ooh. So the little front of the scale is a cobra ready to strike. All right. I'm going to go for just two more. One right there. Ooh. A bed of nails. All right. And we're going to go for one more here and then there. Yes?
The fountain. It's a fountain.
It's a fountain.
Yes.
All right. See, when you get these, it reminds me of, could it be, sometimes it's just a great metaphor. Sometimes, there's something structural or functional going on with a fountain that actually relates to this. We'll go for one more right there. Yeah. So she says it's a little tornado of beavers going into a hole. And you see all their little tails. I'm never going to look at one of these the same way again. So, and how many people enjoyed it? See, what makes it special isn't the pine cone that you picked or were given. It's the attention that you give it. And that's true in everything that is around you. When we give that attention to the world gives back and reveals its wonders and its beauty, and it becomes so much more sacred, so much more fun. There's one other trick that I want to see everybody in this room doing. This is a game changer for the naturalist. Here we've got, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, verbalizing our observations, doing that with a community of like-minded naturalists. The other thing that you want to add to your game is keeping a journal. Keeping a journal. Oh, actually, I thought it was a different slide. We'll talk about keeping a journal in just a moment. So whatever questions come to your mind are absolute gold. But this list is a list that I was visiting. I was trying to figure out what school Amelia should go to, and I visited an international school. And on the wall of every classroom was this list of question prompts. And after walking from class to class to class, I realized that there was absolute genius here. Because what these prompts do is just motivate you to frame a question that you otherwise might not ask in a slightly different way. I've reordered their list, I've modified a few of them, and I added one because I love looking at patterns. All right? But what I do is I write this list into the back of my journal. And I just, when I'm looking at something, if I have the idea of, say, function, how does it work, as a general framework in my head, as I'm doing my I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, the things that will come up to me will be different than if I had chosen another one. The first set of them, why is it like this, change and connection and patterns, these all kind of take us down a scientific path. The last three, I thought, wow, it was absolutely beautiful that these children were thinking about these three. So perspective, they're intentionally saying to themselves about what are the different kinds of points of view on this. All right? What if that was an intentional, honest part of our kind of political discussion in this country? From all of us. From all of us. Right? Reflection. What's my evidence for what I think? How do I know that? All right? We go around with these clear ideas in our head of right and wrong. What's my evidence for that? We have these clear ideas of the way that things work. How strong is the evidence for that? What if we actually thought about those things? And the last one, what is my responsibility to this? All right? And that's a critical core part of what we're all about here in the California Naturalist program. And there it was on the wall of this elementary school in every classroom. So this is I invite you to kind of incorporate this into your game. I use it as my kind of go-to questioning heuristic. And I'm finding it really, really useful. It just makes me think a little bit differently. So this, along with that process we've described, we're good to go. So then I've got one last thing. And you already know what that is. All right? That's keeping a journal. All right? The problem with a lot of people using journals is that we feel that it is supposed to be an art project. All right? And it's not. What the journal is your brain on paper. And to get the fullest punch out of your journal, what you want to do is intentionally use 3 different languages to describe what you experience. So for part of it, you're going to draw pictures, but without worrying about having to make a pretty picture. You're also going to use writing to describe what you see, without worrying about grammar or spelling. You're also going to use math and quantification to describe, measure, count, estimate the things that you see. When we bring all 3 of these together, we've got really powerful tools on the page to get us to think differently. And just to sort of show you kind of what's going on here on a meta level, I want to show you that all this is I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of on paper. All right? So here are observations. Those are my I notices. That it lifts head, straightens back and legs to sort of tear this little vole that it's ripping apart. Right here I've got my it reminds me of. Right? And this was what this observation centered around was watching a kestrel who was sitting on a post in a very, very strong, fierce wind. And it was about as close as we are to each other. So it wasn't flying anywhere, and it was just sort of sitting there kind of leaning into the wind. And this was its posture when the wind blew, and then the wind would slack, and it would do that. So all of those observations, I'm getting those in there using writing and drawing together. All right. It reminded me of kids playing in surf. It reminded me of Krumholtz trees. All right. So you start to get those into the mix, and on the page, and there's just more going on there. You notice up in the top there, there's a question. It's perched within 10 feet of me. Why didn't this bird fly away? Right? So this isn't just a place for my observations. This is a place for my actual thinking and changing my mind. So I then continue to make observations, and I'm talking about this thing lifting its head up, and then I realize that no. This thing isn't lifting its head up. It's not. It's actually just keeping its head down and doing all the lifting with its legs and back. All right? So changing your mind in the face of evidence is a really important science skill. All right? And what I want to do is give myself permission to change my mind on the paper. Then up here with the question, why didn't it fly away? What I did is I just sat down and I tried to say, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. And I came up with as many possible explanations of why that could be. So this is my thinking about what I'm seeing all coming down on paper. And because I'm seeing it on this sheet of paper in front of me, I understand the structure and the relationships of these observations. Putting it physically on the paper using writing, drawing, and quantification and math changes the way you think about things. And notice that there's also, up here, I'll put my shadow by it, here's a little question mark. That's a little stand-in for the explanation of why it's doing what it's doing that I haven't thought of yet. So kind of keeping an open mind of, it could be this, this, or this, or it could be something else. All right? I put my observations out on the table. To move the ball down the field even further, what I can do, continuing to make observations, sometimes you can make observations, and from those observations you can go, you know what, it's probably not that idea. So one of my guesses here that this bird had sensory overload from the wind, right? Another possibility was that the wind makes the flying too difficult. So it's going, yeah, I see you, Laws, but I'm just not going to do that. All right? And then maybe it flies less when it has a prey item or something else. All right? You probably sitting here can probably think of a dozen more possible explanations. But then as I'm sitting there, all of a sudden in a gust of wind, this thing lifts off and starts flying around. It seemed to fly perfectly fine in this strong wind. All right? So what I noticed then is like, nope, this bird flies just fine out here in the wind. So that makes me think, you know what? It's probably not that explanation. So you see how putting this on the page changes the way you think? This is your brain on paper. Right? So, whoa, that was a crazy merge, didn't expect that. So what I have here, right, is a intentional formula for deliberate attention and intentional curiosity, and ways to get that, to externalize these thoughts that are going on in my head, get it in conversation, get it out in the air, get it down on the page. As you start to do this, the world will erupt in front of you. So how do we make connection? How do we make connection with nature? It's the same way we make connection with others. It's through attention. My working definition of love is sustained, compassionate attention. Think about that in relationship to your child. Think of that in relationship to nature. That attention changes who you are. It changes your relationship to that other, right? And crosses that bridge. And that love is what nourishes us as a community of stewards, to continue to do the hard work to preserve and protect and conserve and understand the world around us. Right? There are parts of this work that are a delight. There are parts of this work that are heartbreaking and brutal, and we need to do all that work. Right? And what sustains us through those hard times is nourishing ourselves in the well of love that we get from interaction and connection with nature. So go out, fall in love, and see what comes from that. Thank you so much. So just one last thought. I just want to tell you folks how much I respect and appreciate the work and devotion to this program that you have given. The community that is developing here is strong and vibrant and creative and powerful. Together, we are an incredible force for positive change and conservation. And I'm really honored to be here with you. So thank you for what you've done, and thank you for what we're going to do. It's going to blow all of us away. We don't even know what we have woken up here, and it's going to be absolutely incredible. Thank you.